honest folks out of their timeshares permanently. Today, I run Wesley with my two sons, a real family business, treating every client and every employee like we'd want our own family treated. That philosophy has helped us grow into the largest, most trusted timeshare cancellation company in the United States. Fortune magazine even recognized us as one of the best places to work. Why? Because we genuinely care. In fact, some of our former clients were so moved by their experience working with us, they joined our team so they could help others to timeshare freedom. If you're stuck in a timeshare, give us a call. Let our family help your family.
Call Wesley now for your free timeshare exit kit. 800-226-5454. That's 800-226-5454. 800-226-5454.
A labor strike in Philadelphia is over.
Philadelphia has reached a deal with city workers to end an 8-day strike that closed libraries and halted residential trash pickup. Mayor Sherelle Parker and Municipal Union District Council 33 posted the strike is over on social media. The mayor wrote that the tentative deal, which must be ratified by union members, will gradually increase workers' pay by 14% by the end of the next 3 years.
And that is correspondent Jennifer King reporting. The U.S. is having its worst year for measles in more than 3 decades. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the U.S. has had 1,288 cases since the start of this year. That's higher than in 2019, when there were 1,274 cases driven by 22 outbreaks. Over 12 months, 17 states have seen outbreaks so far this year. Experts fear the U.S. could actually lose its status as a country that has eliminated measles. Breaking news at townhall.com. President Trump says no progress was made on the Russia-Ukraine war during a phone call with Vladimir Putin. Here's White House correspondent Greg Clugston.
After complaining last week that the Biden administration spent too much on defending Ukraine, President Trump said the U.S. will send them more weapons. He said he's not happy with Vladimir Putin and the Russians.
So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
His decision is a dramatic reversal from earlier promises to quickly end the Russia-Ukraine war. Greg Clugston, Washington.
President Trump again said that Jerome Powell should resign immediately, repeating a call he made last week, and noted that, in his words, it's okay with me if Congress were to investigate the Federal Reserve chairman. During a cabinet meeting, the president said he wants the Federal Reserve chairman out of that job. On Wall Street, right now, the Dow is up by about 60 points. More from townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Re-Federalist Radio, where we take a look at current events through an original intent of the Constitution lens. I am Brady, a.k.a. the War Hamster, and joining me today is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs.
Good to be here. Doug. Thank you, sir. I'm glad to be here.
Before we jump in, let's say a quick thanks to all those on Zaki Radio and some of the affiliates like 93.7 KPGF and AM 1060 and all the other affiliates. Last week, we did week one of what we do. It's called a SCOTUS scorecard, where we review the recent decisions of the Supreme Court, again, from the original intent of the Constitution lens. We're not giving a legal analysis. We're giving a constitutional analysis. And one of the questions we're going to always answer is this any of the Supreme Court's business in the first place? And if so, did they make a ruling that the founders of the Constitution would have approved of? Are you ready to jump in?
Ready as always, sir.
All right. The first case we're going to look at this week is called Medina versus Planned Parenthood. Are you how familiar are you with this one?
Just a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay, let me give you the background real quick. 2018, South Carolina had a law prohibiting public funds for abortion. They said public funds could no longer participate in the state's Medicaid program. All right, so I believe that was a bipartisan bill.
Right.
Planned Parenthood would turn around and sue claiming the exclusion violated, and this is a quote, the any qualified provider provision in Medicaid's 1965 charter. The Supreme Court then holds that individuals cannot sue states under the Medicaid Act to challenge the exclusion of providers like Planned Parenthood from Medicaid programs. This decision will allow states to defund such providers without facing federal lawsuits from patients. That's a pretty big determination the Supreme Court made, and it's a huge, big block on Planned Parenthood.
And we have to now when we get to the United States Constitution, remember what we're talking about is whether or not the federal government has an authority. Ultimately, that's what the Constitution is about. And so the question is, does the federal government have an authority to penalize a state for not funding anybody? B, whether or not federal funding or federal decision-making can go into an organization like Planned Parenthood. The argument that would oppose me would immediately say, well, absolutely, because abortion is a right. Well, first of all, if something is a right, that doesn't mean that the federal government has authority involving it. Actually, if you look at the Bill of Rights, begins Congress make no law. If something is a right, that means the federal government has no authority regarding it, first of all. Second of all, this idea that abortion would be a right is dubious at best. If it's a God-given right, first of all, would God give a right such as that? Second of all, the real key component with rights is whether or not a right stops being a right when it begins interfering with somebody else's right. And the proponents of the pro-life movement will tell you that unborn child is a person, and it says right there in the 14th Amendment and or the Fifth Amendment that the rights no person shall be denied due process. I can't remember the exact words off my head, but basically, no person shall be denied their life, liberty, and property without due process. That's what it is. And so, right there, if they're a person, if they are, and that's what the pro-life argument has always been. I've always argued it's not about whether or not abortion is legal, but whether or not that child is a person. It's about personhood. And if that child is a person in the womb, then they have the right not to lose their life without due process.
Now, the Planned Parenthood argument in this case, of course, they come up with their usual thing. Well, this is about reproductive health care. Never mind the fact that it's the opposite of reproduction. And I say this
is true.
Yeah, I say this because their tired argument is abortion only makes up a small percentage of the services we offer. But the real statistic is abortions make up 97.1% of Planned Parenthood's pregnancy resolution services.
They exist for abortion.
Yes, and they try to hide it. They exist for another reason. And here's my biggest issue with Planned Parenthood getting federal or state funding, is they turn around and donate to Democrat political causes and Democrat politicians. So they're using our tax dollars, to fund abortions, which, whether you agree with that or not, let's skip over that. But to then turn around and take that money to fund one single political party's activities, I mean, I would be willing to bet we ought to take a look at their charters, their 501c3 status or 501c4, whatever it is, because that is purely political activity.
And of course, the federal government has no authority to be sending funding into anything that has anything to do with medical procedures or any type of health issues. Health, medicine, all of that's not mentioned in the Constitution. And we know for a fact it isn't, because Benjamin Rush, who was a doctor, was really ticked that health was not, because he believed that actually health services tyranny might be on the horizon. So he wanted it mentioned in there, not because of the desire to have the government funding it, but to keep the government out of it.
When we come back from the break, there's another issue with Planned Parenthood in Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, which we'll address, because that is also going to be in front of the courts very, very soon. In fact, it is. It's working its way through.
Yeah, and as we watch this, understand all these cases do begin somewhere else, and so you can watch the path. And if you go to the Supreme Court blog, once there's a case there, that's one of the best places for you listeners to be able to see what happened and what the Supreme Court said, what were the rulings, the opinions, and all of that. All right, so let's go to break. When we come back, we got a whole lot to tackle.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. That's 800-432-8150.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults in America have pre-diabetes, but most don't know it. To let people know it can be reversed before it becomes type 2 diabetes, professional basketball player Julius Randle is doing everything in reverse.
I'm only dunking with reverse windmills. I drove the whole way to practice in reverse. I don't recommend it. This move's called the reverse shuffle. I do recommend it. And it took me months to learn how to speak in reverse, like this. Years 10 almost for diabetes type 2 with living Ben has mom my. In other words, my mom has been living with type 2 diabetes for almost 10 years. So together, we want to say to the 84 million Americans at risk, exercise and healthy eating can help reverse prediabetes. Start by taking a simple 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
Bet he can't say that in reverse.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Re-Federalist Radio. I am Brady, known as the War Hamster, and with me is Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs.
As always, it's a pleasure.
In our last segment, we discussed the recent Supreme Court decision in Medina versus Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, where the Supreme Court ruled that states can ban the use of Medicaid for Planned Parenthood. Doug, do you think they got this right? Let's give them a letter grade and add it to our scorecard.
I'm going to give it a B+, not because it was not a good decision. It was a very good decision. It was the reason behind it. I don't think they fully understood the constitutional implications there.
B+ is probably about what I was going to go. I was going to go with an A- because the way they word the decision is going to impact a lot more cases in similar subjects. So I'm going to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt because I really like some of the language that was used.
Okay.
But there's another issue about Planned Parenthood that's going through the courts. And if you recall, Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, which is now passed, has a provision that would prohibit Medicaid funding for any healthcare services by Planned Parenthood for 1 year. Now, originally that was 10 years, but the parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, reduced it to 1 year. Address the parliamentarian part of this first for the audience, please.
Yeah, and the parliamentarian, and I was a parliamentarian for the PTA for 4 years. A parliamentarian's job is simply to make sure that the rules for meetings, Robert's rules, if you want to go with that, are being followed. That the procedures are being followed. That the motions and all of that is be done in the right order. On the actual text of the law, what is in it, what isn't in it, really isn't their business. Now, the argument being used is, well, it's not within the rules of the Senate to do certain things. For example, when it came to reconciliation, she was claiming that could not be reconciliation because there was no revenue, even though there was revenue directly related to the bill. Now, that said, what the parliamentarian says is not golden and etched in stone. They can be ignored, they can be replaced, they can be told to take a hike. They're there simply to guide when it comes to the rules of procedure, the procedural rules. That's it.
Yeah, and I'm really unsure how she found a procedure that she could shorten Congress's intent for a 10-year ban, but she apparently did, and the Senate was unable in the House.
And you got the spineless Republicans, and I mean, they got more spine than they used to because of Trump's presidency, but they're still largely spineless. This is where Thune should have said, "Great recommendation. Sorry, not going to happen." Then moved on.
Yeah, very much agreed. He should have done that in a number of the things the parliamentarians took out. But
let's understand real quick: the Senate parliamentarian position is not something that was created by the founding fathers. They did not intend for that position to exist. This is something that was created in 1935. I believe it was FDR's way of getting control of his party, to kind of have the boss's voice on the Senate floor, because at the time, while the Democrats had a supermajority, the party was really split into three ways. You had your Southern Democrats, your conservative Democrats, and progressive Democrats all disagreeing. Supermajority, but you can't pass anything. So what do? You create the Senate parliamentarian, because the House parliamentarian had already been created in the 1920s. So the idea was already there. What a great opportunity. I don't have exact facts. This is basically based on my observation of it. That I believe that Roosevelt's like, okay, this is the way to get my voice in there, get the chaos under control, and get things the way I want. And we've had only 5 Senate parliamentarians over the last during this almost century that we've had that position, and they wield a lot of power that they should not be able to wield.
One of them was a parliamentarian twice because they fired one that ticked off the Senate, and so the old guy got brought back, which is kind of funny if you ask me.
And we do know they can be replaced. I mean, the Republicans replaced Jim Dole in 2001 because he was against the tax cuts and he was playing games and so they said, okay, fine, you're gone, and that's what these spineless Republicans need to do.
Agreed. And the other issue that's working its way through the courts, it's absolutely related, was Trump's Executive Order 14182. That was on January 24th, 2025, very early on. He had an executive order he called Enforcing the Hyde Amendment, which reaffirms the prohibition of federal funding for elective abortions and revokes previous executive orders that had expanded access to, once again, quote unquote, reproductive health care. Mm-hmm. Planned Parenthood immediately slaps a lawsuit on that. Just like Planned Parenthood threw a lawsuit at the One Big Beautiful Bill. There's judges out there trying to put temporary restraining orders to block the One Big Beautiful Bill from being effected. Looks like the Supreme Court case is going to grant the government relief on that. I was looking to see that ruling, and I could not find it over the last week. So if it's already happened, I apologize, but we will inform you when it does. Okay, moving on.
So we got the next bill here, or the next case here.
Yeah, the next case we're going to do. This is a really fun one. It's called Free Speech Coalition. Did I already do that one? Hold on. We want to do Mahmoud versus Taylor. Mahmoud versus Taylor, and this is basically LGBTQ versus parental rights. It's kind of a big deal. So the question here is whether the Maryland parents could opt their children out of exposure to objectionable storybooks. What happened was 3 sets of parents complained that the Montgomery County Board of Education policy forced their children to hear storylines they alleged promoted and this is in quotes from the lawsuit, political ideologies about family life and human sexuality that are inconsistent with sound science, common sense, and the well-being of children. These three sets of parent groups, there's a Muslim group, Roman Catholic group, and an Orthodox Christian group. They were all objecting to the LGBTQ stuff that was being forced, their kids were being forced to participate in. The books at question, and I've actually brought a couple pictures of these if I can find them real quick. This one is called Uncle Bobby's Wedding, and it's pretty bad. We'll show the cover on this one. And if you're listening on the radio, what you'll see is two gentlemen getting married with a smiling little kid, and this wonderful scene. And apparently these parent groups objected to that. The other one was a book by the name of Born Ready: The True Story of a Boy Named Penelope, which is shockingly about a transgender child. Any thoughts before we go into the discussion?
I was very involved with this issue when I lived in Southern California. I was friends with a couple of the school board members. I actually ran for the school board in 2018. And I have a couple of the books that they were pushing. And while were not LGBTQ XYZ, they were about the birds and the bees, to put it nicely. And there are cartoon depicted scenes of the action of the birds and the bees in the books. And if a parent, if a parent was handing these books to their child, it'd be child abuse, it would be molestation. But if the schools do it, suddenly it's fine and it's education. I don't think so. And then of course there's the other question here, which we're going to delve into in a sec. Does the federal government have the authority to be involved in any way with education?
The answer would be no, of course. In this particular case, it is a state issue. In fact, and since they're in Maryland, the parents would probably be not getting what they want. In this case, it's great that the Supreme Court interfered for these parents, but if we're talking about strict constitutionality, I agree with Doug.
Yeah.
This Board of Education decreed that the parents should not expect to receive prior notice before one of the books was read out loud in class, thus enabling a child to leave the room for that period. So what are the issues? In the decision, Alito writes, schools must let kids opt out of LGBTQ plus readings. And he says, in quote, "We have long recognized the rights of parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children. And we have held that those rights are violated by government policies that substantially interfere with the religious development of children." Did he get that right, Doug?
Well, he got it right in the sense that he's correct in what he's saying. Again, federal government doesn't have the authority to dictate that, but through the courts. But he is right in what he said. And actually, the solution ultimately is simply this: it's a free market. You don't like what the public school's doing, then you got the private school, you got homeschooling. Problem is, most parents can't afford that. And this is where the school choice initiatives are so important.
Yeah, that's the answer I expected from you. We've obviously, because we discussed this on other issues like, gun rights, et cetera. Mm-hmm. If you don't like something, work to get it. If you don't like something in your state, work to get it changed or move. It's much better than having an overbearing federal government sticking its nose to every nook and cranny of our life. Mm-hmm. As you might expect, Justice Sotomayor delivered a very fierce dissent. And she says, quote, "Public education was intended to be a unifying experience for children and the most pervasive means for promoting our common destiny."
Well, that was collectivism in a nutshell.
Very much so. She also adds, the concept would become a mere memory if pupils were insulated from exposure to ideas and concepts that may conflict with their parents' religious beliefs.
The reality is children are impressionable, and they know it, and they're taking advantage of it. And when I say they, I mean the system.
Yeah, there's a bit more to this. We'll jump into what the American Library Association talked about with this, and when we get back from the break. But this is the decision went the way an awful lot of parents, wanted it to, because this is a nationwide issue. And I've spoken in front of school boards from this about the same issues you have. And there is a big push from the teachers union to keep pushing this stuff. So this is a win for parents, right?
Let's go to break.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi, tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
Reno's Veterans Guest House is the home away from home that provides temporary overnight lodging for veterans or family members receiving medical care in the Reno area, some from hundreds of miles away, like veteran Joy Brown.
I'm a Navy veteran, and I go quite often due to my service-connected disabilities, and it gives me a place to stay because there's no way I can drive back and forth.
Veterans Guest House receives no government money. It's privately supported by people like you.
Please support the guest house. Thank you.
Find out how you can help at veteransguesthouse.org.
At A Proper Fit Footwear in the Reno Town Mall, we've been accomplishing happy feet for over 30 years.
We offer a various range of shoe styles and sizes for both men and women. From all-season shoes and orthotics to work boots and safety shoes, our professional and reliable staff possesses the knowledge to help you find the proper shoes to fit your needs. Hard to fit? Hard to find?
A Proper Fit Footwear is here to give our customers happy feet. We make people aware of potential foot problems as we're sizing their feet, suggesting the right arch support, and guiding them to the proper shoes for their needs.
Stop by A Proper Fit Footwear at 4001 South Virginia Street in the Reno Town Mall today, and allow the owner Mike Jones and our fabulous staff to find the perfect pair of shoes tailored to your specific needs.
A Proper Fit Footwear in the Reno Town Mall, the home of happy feet, where comfort and your feet meet.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
And we are back with another segment of Re-Federalist Radio. I am Brady, known as the War Hamster, and I'm with Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. Last segment, we were talking about a parental rights case versus LGBTQ. This is a big deal that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the parental rights. It's a big deal because the American Library Association estimates that there are at least 112 proposed state laws concerning schools and public libraries that seek to expand the definition of what, and this is a quote, of what is deemed obscene or harmful to children, and to limit librarian staff's ability to determine which books they hold in their collections. The American Library Association wants to decide what your kids read. They don't want you to. And again, 112 cases around the country that are all probably going to move forward because of this Supreme Court case. These state laws are going to be upheld. And the question, of course, is, does this border on censorship?
And remember, the opposition to this are the same people that were calling parents who were complaining about it at school board meetings domestic terrorists.
Yeah, very much so. And speaking of the opponents, and this one we have to bring up before we give this a letter grade. It's a group called Catholics for Choice, which opposes the court's ruling. And here's the quote from their statement in their amicus brief. It said, "It's also important for children to learn that our differences, religion, sexual orientation, gender expression, race, economic backgrounds, and more, contribute to a thriving community and are not something to be ashamed of." So we have the woke Catholic Church sticking its nose into there once again. And it's not just the Catholic Church. I was raised Episcopalian, and they've got some of the most woke churches you will ever run into.
And as a society, we have to understand that, especially when you have a Christian foundation that this society, this culture has, there is definitely a difference between right and wrong. And as Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, it's self-evident. These truths are self-evident. And your society's success or failure is very dependent upon knowing the difference between what's right, wrong, or in between. When we start muddying the waters between right and wrong, and we start teaching our children that pluralistic thinking, relativistic thinking is the way to go. You wind up with a society who disrespects the rule of law, wants to eliminate those who might enforce the rule of law, and may even lead to violence in the streets. Not that we're seeing anything like that today.
No, indeed. So let's give this decision a grade. I've got the let's pull up the scorecard here, and this is Mahmoud versus Taylor. I'll go first this time. I'm actually going to give them a B- on this one. It's the right decision, and the short-term effect is going to be a positive. But as Doug mentioned earlier, do we really want the Supreme Court to be weighing in on school board decisions?
And once again, as our parents, our communities really need now to make sure school choice happens in their neighborhoods. It's really up to the communities. I'm going to give it a solid B. Once again, it's same thing as you're saying, right decision, but I don't like the federal interference.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah, I thought we'd see that one pretty close to eye to eye. All right, let's move on to our next case, and that is going to be, it's called Trump versus the American Federation of Government Employees. This has to do with Trump's Executive Order 14210, which he called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, the Workforce Optimization Initiative. Obviously, as is with just about everything Trump does, a lawsuit was slapped on it immediately, trying to get a restraining order to keep them from implementing the federal government's ability to fire workers and become more efficient. The case was presented for a stay. It was granted pending disposition of appeal. The district court injunction from a California judge, of course, gets to the Supreme Court. The majority explains that Trump is likely to prevail on its argument that the executive order and a memorandum from the OMB and Office of Personnel Management to implement the executive order are legal. So they said, based on the merits, it is very likely that they're going to prevail. So we are going to block your restraining order. The key criteria that's the key criteria for determining whether to grant temporary relief. Is it likely that they're going to win on the merits? As you might guess, this was an 8-1 decision, where Ketanji Brown Jackson is the lone dissenter once again. And
what a surprise! I'm sorry. Yeah, she has been so bad. Even Sotomayor is like, you just don't understand the deep implications, do you? You don't understand the legalities, do you?
It's more like, did you even go to law school? That's what?
Yeah, and you know it's bad when even your folks on your side of the aisle are going, oh wow. But anyway, continue, please.
Well, as always, she's also long-winded, even though she's wrong. And so what KBJ says in her 15-page opinion, and I'm not going to bother reading that whole thing and boring everyone to death. We'd lose all our viewers. But a couple of quotes. She says this allows an apparently unprecedented and congressionally unsanctioned dismantling of the federal government to continue apace, causing, and the histrionics in her language, they're getting tiresome. She goes, causing irreparable harm before courts can determine whether the president has the authority to engage in the actions he proposes. Doug, isn't he in charge of the executive branch?
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking about saying is, first of all, who are the people that are being fired? They are members of the executive branch. Agencies, departments, all of the agencies and departments fall under the executive branch. And the boss of the executive branch is the chief executive, a.k.a. President of the United States, a.k.a. Donald J. Trump. This idea that he cannot fire someone until he checks with Congress or checks with the courts and they can micromanage his decisions would be like saying that the CEO of a company cannot fire or lay off somebody until the box boy or mail boy down in the mailroom approves of it. Ultimately, it is his job. It is his branch. If he's doing it in a way they don't like or we don't like, then we change the executive. But he's the boss. It's his job. It's his place. His job is to execute the laws of the United States, and he has that branch to do it. And if they're not doing it the way he wants it done, bye-bye.
It's just consistent with Ketanji Brown Jackson's stance that the courts get to determine pretty much everything the other branch does. She's been very consistent on that this term, and she's not going to change for this one.
Yeah,
she goes on.
Well, there's something called separation of powers. Keep that in mind as you listen to what she's saying. Go ahead.
She goes on. She actually characterized Judge Ilston, who gave the temporary restraining order. He said his order is a temporary, practical, harm-reducing preservation of the status quo. That was ultimately, once again in quotes, no match for this court's demonstrated enthusiasm for greenlighting this president's legally dubious actions in an emergency posture. The histrionics go, and this is why the other justices are getting fed up with her. Her language, it's designed to be inciting.
Well, it's not just that. The Democratic Party, the left, the progressives, whatever you want to call them, they're all about hope and change. Change this, change that, change everything. Suddenly now we got to do whatever we can to preserve the status quo.
Sotomayor, who's agreed with the majority, also wrote a one-paragraph opinion which agreed with the government's request. So Ketanji writes 15 pages, and Sotomayor managed to rebut that with one paragraph.
By the way, folks, a good writer can say a lot with a little. All right, go ahead.
Generally speaking, that's the case. Yeah, you do not need to write. You do not need to rewrite tragedy and hope to make your point. So Sotomayor stresses that the executive order instructs agencies to, quote, to plan reorganizations and reductions in force, and this is important, consistent with applicable law and the OMB-OPM memorandum. If you look at the executive order, it says everything must be done according to existing law. And this
Which
judge
is the top executive, existing law.
And this judge was trying to block them from even planning these reductions as it works its way through courts. Mm-hmm. So, but Sotomayor went a little bit further. She goes, because the court is not considering the legality of those plans, and we thus have no occasion to consider whether they can and will be carried out, consisting with the strict constraints of law, she agreed with the decision to grant relief now and allow the district court to consider those questions in the first instance, which is absolutely 100% correct.
Mm-hmm. Let them plan it, and then when it happens, we'll take a look.
Anything else you want to add on this one, or you want to go straight to the
I'm surprised you didn't dig far enough into Sotomayor's writings. I don't know if it was this case or a different one. I think it was a different one where she really hammers Jackson. But
yeah, we'll get to that because there's more cases to go. And Jackson did not have a good court session this month.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was watching her on some interview, and she was actually complaining in the interview that she doesn't get to say as much as she's used to because there's other justices there. In other words, they basically told her, "Shut up."
Yeah, and the statistics. Once again, Ketanji Brown Jackson has spoken more than any other Supreme Court justice, and the one who we think, I think, Doug and I are in agreement, is the best Supreme Court judge, speaks the least. So
Alito?
No, Clarence Thomas, but Alito's pretty
Thomas,
close.
Yeah. Alito and Thomas are right there at the top. I like them both for different reasons, but okay.
All right, let's get a scorecard up here and see how we do. Doug, you want to give this one a grade?
Yeah, A+. They nailed it. And it's good when even the ones who normally are against you says, yeah, this is the way we got to go.
Yeah, well, they're basically saying the temporary restraining order that stops the government from doing its job and actually making plans in case they win is ridiculous on its surface. Mm-hmm. We will decide the merits later on to the lower courts. Remember, Supreme Court always wants the merits of a case to be hammered out in the lower courts, the fact-finding, before it ever gets to the Supreme Court. They don't want to be doing the fact-finding at the Supreme Court. They want to be ruling on the constitutionality of the decisions. So I am also giving that an A+. They got it absolutely right. And if I could give it another plus, because when you get a liberal justice hammering Ketanji Brown Jackson, it is an added bonus.
A++ with a cherry on top.
Very good. We have time to just, I'll give the tracings of the next one I want to talk about here. This is where do I have that? Here it is. This is a recent case that just came through.
Let's introduce it, and then we'll have to go to break.
Yep. It says the court allows the Trump administration to move forward in sending a group of immigrants to South Sudan. So we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. But these immigration cases are very important.
Well, and it comes down to, is the president executing existing law? That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, very much so. And we'll get into the details of that after the break.
Sliced fresh sandwiches every day, made right before your eyes. The port of Subway could be a smoking number 5 or a classic number 8, or maybe an Italian is your number 1 fave. Whatever you crave, prepare to fall in love. Sliced fresh sandwiches, port of Subs.
The grilled chicken melt at Port of Subs will warm up your winter with savory grilled chicken and your favorite melty cheese on fresh-baked pepperoncini pepperjack bread, topped with all your favorite veggie toppings and sauces. Bundle up with savory Cool Ranch Doritos, a refreshing Sprite, and a classic chocolate chip cookie for a hearty meal that'll leave you feeling oh so satisfied. Available for a limited time at your neighborhood Port of Subs, or order at portofsubs.com or on our mobile app. Port of Subs, we're slicing up the quality you crave.
Whatever yummy number you're dreaming of, sliced fresh sandwiches, Port of Subs.
Hey, all you entrepreneurs out there. Whether you have a small business or work from home, LaRue Press offers a virtual office and business address for all your business needs. Located at 280 Gregg Street, Suite 10, LaRue Press is your personal assistant for friendly all-day service. Need a conference room to meet with clients? You got it. With LaRue Press, you also get phone answering service, mail forwarding, package pickup, and even help branding your business. Call LaRue Press at 849-3814 or go online to lrpnv.com.
The all-volunteer nonprofit Assistance League, Reno Sparks, is working to improve lives in Washoe County. Annually, they provide new clothes and grooming essentials to over 3,000 children through Operation School Bell. Students in Transition addresses needs of homeless teens. Find out more by visiting their website, renosparks.assistanceleague.org. These activities are funded by Assistant League's Thrift Shop at 1701 Vassar Street, open 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now back to the show.
All right, we are back for the final segment of today's Re-Federalist Radio. Before the break, we talked about a recent ruling the Supreme Court had based on Trump's administration's ability to send a group of immigrants to South Sudan. And I'm just going to read this article straight from SCOTUS blog, which is one of the great places to follow Supreme Court decisions. And let's see, it says the Supreme Court on Thursday afternoon cleared the way for the Trump administration to send a group of immigrants currently being held on a U.S. military base in the East African country of Djibouti into South Sudan. In a brief opinion, the justices made clear that their June 23rd order, which paused an order by a federal judge in Massachusetts limiting the government's ability to deport immigrants to countries that are not specifically identified in their removal orders, applies fully to these 8 immigrants that are in U.S. custody in Djibouti. Doug, you want to translate that for our audience?
Well, you know, it's funny because legal speak sometimes messes people up. But basically what it's saying, the Supreme Court said that that this idea of the justices interfering with his ability to execute his job, first of all, is no good. And that they're going to pause the order by a inferior judge that interferes with that. Now, that said, what it means, what the way the left is taking it, it means, that he could just send whoever he wants to any other country. So, you're going to disappear and be sent to, Siberia somewhere. That's not what it says. It's a matter of executing laws, deporting people who have broken the law, who should be deported. And it basically the court has cleared the way that he can do his job, and you combine this with the elimination of universal injunctions. He's pretty much free to do his job now.
Yeah, I see 2 things going on here. First of all, they're trying to find a loophole. Said, well, the deportation order didn't specifically mention this country, so you can't send them there, which really a borderline argument. I think he might have laughed. I think he might have been laughed out of court for that one. But the other thing they're saying is, look, Judge, we just shot down another judge. Just 3 days ago. We meant what we said. when you can't block their deportation orders. And that's really what they did. The dissent was a fun one. From Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Her opinion was judged by Ketanji Brown Jackson, dissenting again. And she argued that the Thursday's order, that was the previous order, and this is in quotes, clarifies only one thing. Other litigants must follow the rules, but the administration has the Supreme Court on speed dial. Thought it was a very interesting comment.
Mm.
Because
and it plays into the continuing argument that the president has everybody afraid and doing his bidding because, they're afraid to go against this authoritarian, and that's not it at all, of course. But
no, it's an alternative reality they've been painting for a while because they want, just remember the left has been doing things they couldn't do legislatively or constitutionally for years. They've been using the courts. Mm-hmm. And it's only recently that they've lost control of the courts. And that's why you hear them talk about packing the courts.
Right.
And so they've lost them. Yeah.
Well, this idea of using the courts too to do their bidding. I mean, this goes all the way back to John Marshall. They when the left, or at least the version of the left back then, the Federalist Party, the Hamiltonians, lost the White House, lost both houses of Congress in 1800, and in 1801, before Jefferson was inaugurated, what did they do? They packed the court, the whole system, not just the Supreme Court, the entire system. And as Jefferson said, they retreated to the stronghold of the courts where it'd be more difficult to dislodge them. And they've been there ever since. And that's going to be Trump's greatest enduring legacy, is working on the courts, getting the courts where they should be.
Yeah, very much so. You want to give this one a quick grade before we jump into our final case?
I'm going to give it a solid A. I'm not going to go plus per se, but I'm going to give it a solid A. I think they were on target. I think that there should have been a little bit more clarity in the judicial opinion that was in regards to what they meant. And so that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of the opposition kind of strike back the way they are. Well, you're just saying you can disappear anybody anywhere.
I am giving them an A+. They get the plus because they did respond very quickly. And as Sotomayor's dissent, it seems like he had them on speed dial. No, they're just tired of this nonsense. This is quit bothering us with this stuff. And this was a very short hearing. So yeah, they get the A+ on this one for me. Because it should put a stop to this stuff for a while. Should. All right, our last case today is a big one. And this is the United States versus Skermeti. We talked about this earlier in the year when we did our SCOTUS session preview case. So what this is about is what does the Constitution, what it does or does not say about transgender issues? What sort of government discrimination distinctions pass constitutional muster and what sorts are improper? They get into the 14th Amendment Equal Protections Clause. And really what the arguments are really simple. Alphas versus betas. If I say all alphas can't do this, or if you're an alpha, you can't do this, but non-alphas can, you can't treat the alphas worse than any other class. You also can't say if you're a beta, you can do this, but nobody else can. You can't treat them better. That's really the legal test of what is discrimination.
And mind you, it's equal protection under the law. What does the law say? And we tend to want to expand this to private businesses, personal engagements, and so on and so forth. Remember, it's all about what does the law say.
And when it comes to discrimination, you really have to make a differentiate between immutable characteristics and non-immutable characteristics. And the example that was argued here is you could say all arsonists need to be punished because they have made a choice to be a special class of people who commit arson. But you can't go out and make a law against, say, dark-skinned people. That would be discrimination against an immutable characteristic.
Well, and to go back to your arsonist example, all arsonists, but you can't then say all people who light fires are arsonists.
Very good. Because lighting fires is not arson. It is a different...
Right.
This background of the case goes back to 2023. Tennessee enacts a bipartisan law that prohibits healthcare providers from performing surgeries on minors, what they call gender-affirming surgery or what have you. The ACLU, of course, challenges the law on behalf of 3 families, and the Biden administration intervenes on behalf of those 3 families. The name of this bill is SB 1. They argued the ACLU, that the SB1 classifies based on sex because its medical use prohibitions reference sex. Supreme Court disagreed 6-3. Can you guess who the three were?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Kagan, Sotomayor, and I'm not sure what a woman is, Jackson.
This is a really important decision because it's a harbinger of a lot of future cases.
Right.
There's cases going through about men and women's sports and men and women's bathrooms. And this really is a harbinger with good news. The ACLU is arguing that SB1, and this is their term they use, turned on sex, that the entire bill, the fulcrum of it was sex. And says it because it prohibits the treatment for one sex but not for the other. The majority explained that no, SB1 turns on, quote, underlying medical concern. This is a big deal because they referenced a number of European findings, medical findings, but from England and a few other countries that really that are showing the danger of treating adolescents with these gender-affirming surgeries and hormone treatment. And Supreme Court absolutely looked into that. There's something called the Bostock decision, what's called a but-for causation test. The court did not address this. I'll save that one for another day, whether that test can be imported into an equal protection clause. That's something to keep an eye on with equal protection. I like what Barrett and Thomas said. They concurred and explained that establishing a new quasi-suspect class was nearly impossible due to a demanding standard of immutability and discrimination enforced by law. That's well said.
Absolutely. And we have to remember also that when you're dealing with rights, it comes down to what I talk about all the time. And I mentioned this earlier in the show, does that right interfere with another right? I have a right to swing my arms. I do not have a right to swing my arms so my fist hits you in the face, because you have a right not to be struck. So does the right of transgenderism interfere with another right when it comes to female sports, for example? Is the participation in that sport by the quote-unquote woman that is a biological man interfering with the rights of the woman? Is, when it comes to the education system, are those rights interfering with the rights of the parents? And if the answer is yes, then whatever you say is a right stopped being a right.
Yeah, agreed. Very much so. A couple of the things, the implications of this ruling it's a big deal. It signals that a majority of the court think that some sex-based lines are constitutionally permissible, which there is actually a difference between a man and a woman, is what they're saying there. And if the majority of the court feels that way, that's going to help with some other ones.
Yeah, it amazes me that they follow the science until it comes to biology.
Once again, what was the question asked of Ketanji Brown Jackson? Can you define what a woman?
Yeah.
Well, apparently she's going to be able to after this ruling, because the majority has said that there is a difference. Sotomayor gave the oral dissent, and she went on for about 15 minutes. And again, it was very histrionic. The big quote from that was, "The court abandons transgender children and their families to political whims." She was doing the bleeding heart routine. Won't you think about the children?
Because apparently feelings are much more important than natural rights in the Constitution.
Yeah, and we don't even need
And if feelings are more important than the rule of law, you're not going to respect the rule of law, hence what you see in the streets. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into, we don't have time to, but, whether these, why is the cases of transgenderism going through the roof? We had thousands of years of civilization where a very small percentage of the population fit into that category, and all of a sudden in the last 20 years, it's skyrocketing.
It's a social construct. It absolutely is.
It's absolutely not organic, and you can't argue that it is. And they're making the argument, well, this is how they were born that way. Well, no, you weren't. It was done to you. You've been groomed quite often. Yet there are some people that are born in the wrong body. They exist, and they're very, very infinitesimal percentage-wise. Let's give this one.
But even then, it turns out to be a blessing in the long run if they look at it in the right way. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, let's go ahead and give this one a grade. You can go first.
I'm going to give it a B plus. They got it right, but once again, I'm always nervous when the federal government starts poking its nose into issues that should be community-led.
Yeah, I understand that. In this particular case, I don't think it's as much of a problem because with the issue they were deciding is something that has to be decided once and for all on a national level. We can't have each individual court deciding whether there's a different class of people and that issue at stake. So I'm going to give them a solid A on this one. And I'm looking at this Supreme Court scorecard so far, and it's a lot better than they did last year, because you've given out one F and all B's and A's, and my lowest grade so far has been a C+. So the cases we've looked at, the Supreme Court is doing a pretty darn good job this session. Would you not agree?
Oh, yeah. And, we have right now not only a court that's following the Constitution, but a president, too.
All right. Until next week. Cheers, everyone.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin